Hi and welcome to the latest episode of Ryan's Rant. Today my guest is Ryan Sands, who is a South African ultramarathon athlete. In 2010, most noticeably, he became the first competitor to have won all four of the four deserts race. Now, rather than getting too tired and fatigued by just filling you in on what Ryan has done, I'd rather let him speak for himself. But first and foremost, Ryan, how are you keeping today?
Yeah, great to be chatting. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, all good. Yeah, or as I mentioned earlier, kind of the from a pandemic point of view or COVID point of view, things are definitely improving. So yeah, fingers crossed that life can return to some form of normal towards the second half of this year. But otherwise, yeah, all good. Thanks.
Good to hear. Well, yeah, all things considered. And normally I get guests to give a spew on their childhood education and all that, but seeing as your body of work is quite unique and quite intense to the untrained or unexperienced eye, the big thing that kind of got me thinking and questioning was like, what got you into, first of all, it probably started as running, but then ultimately building to marathons, ultra marathons. Like, was there a person? Was it not being good enough at another sport? So you said, listen, I'll give running a try. Or how did you end up saying, you know what, running's my thing?
Yeah, I guess by accident is probably the quickest answer, but to kind of go into a bit more detail, growing up in South Africa, obviously kind of the main sports here are kind of rugby and cricket. I wasn't ever that good at cricket, but I really enjoyed rugby and did fairly well at a school level. Unfortunately or fortunately, I kind of stopped growing in about standard 8. So when I was about 15 or so, and yeah, obviously, again, kind of growing up in South Africa, rugby players are generally quite big. So I was getting bashed around quite a lot. Played a bit of rugby at university, but I think after getting steamrolled a couple of times, I realized I needed to find like a different sport or something new. And I guess growing up as a kid, I've always been a very outdoors person. Spent a lot of time at the beach, surfing, but never running, to be honest. And it was only kind of last year at university that I had some friends running an out of town half marathon, and I always used to, or it was an out of town half marathon, but it was like during a big kind of festival, which was always like kind of a big party, and I used to go there. But I thought kind of being final year at university doing my honors that I decided like I probably needed to be a little bit more responsible and like at least have a reason to go and have a party. So I decided to join them and do the half marathon. But being a student, I left it pretty late to enter or do any training. And I think it was like three weeks out when I tried to enter the half marathon and entries were full. So I thought kind of half marathon, full marathon, kind of same, being a bit naive, and just entered the full marathon, being 42.2 Ks. And yeah, I guess to my surprise and my friend's surprise, finished the race and actually really enjoyed it. And from there, one thing led to another. Growing up in Cape Town on the back slopes of Table Mountain, came back home and joined a local running club. And a lot of the guys are very into trail running, and just kind of started spending more and more time on the trails, probably less time partying with my mates. And before I knew it, I'd run one or two local trail races, and I'd signed up for the Gobi Desert race, which was, I guess, the start of my international career, start of my ultra career. And yeah, I trained really hard for that. I was hoping for a top 20, a top 10, but I never expected to win it. So kind of being able to achieve that and win the Gobi Desert race in 2010 definitely kind of, I guess, kickstarted my career and made me, I start to wonder if it was possible to do this as a career. I think being able to travel around the world, live some crazy adventures definitely sounded a little bit more fun and exciting than being a quantity surveyor at the time. So that's, I guess how I got into the sport, and that's what 14, 15 years later. So yeah, it's been pretty kind of one crazy adventure. I guess like a lot of my friends from school and university, or kind of university, I guess some of the guys saw me getting a little bit into running. But when I saw some of my schoolmates, like 5 years after I got into running, they were like, what the hell? Like, you were the last guy that we would expect to kind of get into running. So yeah, I guess you never know where kind of things are going to take you.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the rugby, because one of the last guests I had on was Malcolm Marks, who I'm sure
Okay.
most of the locals would know.
Yes.
But with regards to your start there, you said you started kind of running some of the local events or even the marathons. Was there ever a stage where your head got turned back? So obviously you got the bug for it. You go, oh, the marathon or whatever. It was very enjoyable. But like, was it there and then you were saying, okay, I don't want to be a quantitative surveyor. I don't want to go down another boring route. Was that the definitive time where you were like, this is what I want to do going forward?
Yeah, I think it was only actually after the kind of, I wouldn't even say it was during the Gobi Desert race. That was like, so basically to kind of go back into the Gobi Desert race, it's a 250 kilometer self-supported event over 7 days. So you run an average about a marathon a day, and then on the long stage you ran anything from 80 to 100 kilometers. And for me, it was just kind of that one event that I was focusing on. Actually, I think some of the final weeks of training before leaving for the event, I promised myself that I was going to throw my running shoes away once I got back from the Gobi Desert race. And as I said, I did much better than I expected. But it was quite weird, because I definitely, like that first marathon I ran, the Niza Marathon, and a couple of other events, I definitely kind of just winged it. I can't say I was overly prepared or trained that hard. Whereas for the Gobi, I definitely put a lot into that. Probably kind of looking back now, some of the hardest training I'd ever done. And it was all about that one event, and I'd kind of dedicated 6 months of my life to that. I think it was either I was either kind of working, kind of eating, or training. That's literally all I was doing. And yeah, I guess I kind of got to that event, kind of ticked the box, and it was quite weird. Like, we'd finished the event and I was on a massive high. Like, I'd won the event. I never expected that to happen in my wildest dreams. And you were kind of on the bus. They had various buses that took you back to kind of the main town in China called Kashgar. And it was like a 3 or 4 hour bus trip. And yeah, it was quite a weird feeling. Like, as I said, that euphoria from kind of achieving your goal, and kind of like even more than I expected, but also this massive like emptiness. Like, I'd spent 6 months of my life kind of devoted to one specific goal, and now it's over. Like, what next? So I think it was after that the running bug definitely bit. It was, I think, only about a year later that I kind of went kind of fully professional and fully quit my job. So there was a bit of a transition period, and kind of, yeah, I guess a period where, like, I had to think about things. Ultra running was then a very new sport. It is still relatively new now, and to make a living off it, like, initially was quite challenging, and I had to take one or two risks. But it just took a bit of time to transition from kind of, yeah, doing it, I guess, like as an amateur, or not kind of needing to feed myself from the sport, to kind of moving into and making it my career.
And at that stage, you were saying there it took like a year, and then you progressed and focused professionally on it, and that's what you put all your efforts towards. Like, was it purely yourself that was prepping for these events, dealing with nutrition, dealing with the training loads? Because as you said, it was just at the start. So were you kind of winging it, or did you actually have outside help, a trainer or a friend who knew the ins and outs of how to successfully run large
Yeah.
distances?
No, I think I've been like really lucky that I've always had an amazing team around me and supporting me. And I think I always said, for me, it's just like finding like-minded people that are as passionate as me, like, about like what I'm doing. And yeah, I was lucky to have a great team. So I had a coach. I did a lot of research about the event and upcoming events. But yeah, like coach was great. Had like a physio, chiropractor, did some liner therapy. So I had a good like team, kind of, I guess, keeping everything, kind of keeping my wheel alignment as such in place. I was doing a lot of strength work. Also going, so I did the Gobi Desert first, and then the second desert race I did was the Sahara Desert. And by then I'd linked up with Professor Tim Noakes, he's a pretty well-known sports professor, and he really helped me. I did some training before the Sahara Desert race in an environmental chamber, which I guess the best way to describe it is like a single garage with a treadmill in, where you can control the heat and humidity, so that would make it like really hot. And I think that definitely
Lovely.
really helped me prepare for the Sahara Desert race. Like mentally and physically, kind of, because the Sahara Desert race was kind of just after our winter in Cape Town, so it was relatively cold, not perfect conditions to be training for a race where the temperatures are like 45 degrees on average a day. So yeah, I think like having a strong team around me was really important. But like I said, I think the sport was relatively new, so I almost kind of feel like I was going into this new world or this new job, but there was no like job description. It wasn't like kind of cool, you study to become a quantity surveyor or an accountant or doctor. This was like kind of, you got to figure it out for yourself. So I think luckily kind of had one or two mentors early on in my career, and someone like Dean Conazes from the US, really well known ultra runner. I met up with him in the Sahara Desert race. He ran there, and also actually the Gobi Desert race. And he was just kind of gave me loads of advice. I think which really helped. I think kind of something that always stands out is, remember after I won the Sahara Desert race, and I was trying to pick his brain about getting like sponsorships, because like I was finding it quite frustrating, because I was like, I'm doing well in these events, but it's hard to get sponsorships. And he said something to me like really valuable. He said like, winning races is great, but it's not going to necessarily get you sponsorships. And it was something that stuck with me and really made me think. And I think like throughout my career, it's been really important to kind of really like look at the bigger picture. It's like, you're a professional athlete, you need to train and do well in events, but you also kind of need to be there for your sponsors. You kind of need to, like, obviously social media is such a massive thing now. It wasn't even that big then, but that like takes up a lot of time. There's a lot of gear testing, feedback, appearances, doing speaking and stuff like that. So it's definitely like a bigger thing, and I guess almost like seeing yourself as a brand or a business, which is really, I think, important, and something I always try and like talk to young up and coming trail runners. Is not just like all kind of young up and coming guys, especially in like the individual sports. Like it's not like just kind of eat, train, and sleep. You need to like do a lot more, and especially these days with social media becoming such a big part of things.
Yeah, no, well said. And you mentioned there, like, as in you built up on the strength training. You mentioned your win with the Sahara and the four desert races. I suppose it's nearly a double question, but I'll just deal with one at a time. I don't want to confuse you too quickly here. But say before you had your successes, say around 2010, that's where some of your noticeable achievements took place. Before then, you obviously entered in several different races as well. You'd obviously had success. You've had disappointments in that. Was there a stage early on, and I know now you've been racing a very long time now and you're nearly heading towards the age of 40, which is incredible feat, to be honest. I know age is just a number, you'd say, but was there a was there a stage early on where it could have been a race, it could have been in prep, it could have been something non-race related where you failed, or say there was an injury or there was a bad performance that really made you question? Because as you said, at this time you'd established yourself, you'd had a bit of success, you had a good team around you, in those early stages, was there ever a moment that really not so much made you question if you wanted to keep going, but maybe question your own ability, your own mental strength to, spend years at this sport and be a success?
Yeah, for sure. I think as I mentioned, kind of like that transition period from going to amateur to professional. I remember my first race. It was like another multi-stage race in Namibia, and we started off in the Fish River Canyon, and that was my first race as a professional. Again, I'd won two big ultra races, being the Gobi and the Sahara, and there was a lot more kind of pressure and eyes on me, and yeah, I ended up coming second. I'd like first day or two had two really bad days, and I think it was more just like the mental pressure I'd put on myself, and there was definitely like it was the first time like I felt like I actually had like proper sponsors who believed in me, and kind of I was the favorite going into the race, and like kind of you feel like you gotta win the race, new sponsors, and that was definitely, as I say, looking back now, it's pretty stupid. Like I came second, and it was a good race, but I definitely like back then, especially those first few days, definitely started to like question like, was this kind of what I wanted to do, and as you say, like, could I actually do it? Was I not maybe just a one hit wonder or a two hit wonder? So yeah, I guess that was fairly early on in my career, and then there've been a couple of times further down the career where I got glandular fever, mononucleosis, which really set me back badly for a year. And in ultra running, like a big thing is overtraining syndrome, and I guess that was kind of the early stages of overtraining syndrome, and it took me a long time to bounce back. And you definitely start to doubt yourself, like, can I actually run? Is this just kind of I've pushed my body and mind too many times? So there was a period like that as well. I think that was in 2015. So there definitely been a couple of highs and lows, and as you mentioned, the sad thing about our sport and ultra running is generally guys are actually getting a lot better now, but there was a period where guys would just kind of come onto the scene, kind of completely smash one or two races and break records, and then they just disappear. And it's just because they were just doing like a crazy amount of training, just completely burnt themselves out over 2 years, over raced, and that was the end of them. So I've been lucky to, as you say, like kind of nearing my 40s now in South Africa. You'd refer to me as an old bully, like an old dude. Like I'm definitely getting a bit older, but I think if you enjoy what you're doing, kind of keep going. I've also started like mixing things up and doing like some projects as well, so race a little bit less, and again, that's something I really enjoy. Like I think what got me into the sport, and probably like the first big ultra race I entered was the Gobi Desert race, which to me just seemed like this one epic adventure. And now I think I've always enjoyed the kind of adventure aspect of trail running.
Yeah, no, well said. And I'd say South Africa is a good place to explore the trails and get after it, so to speak. But with regards to, say, your training, and as you said there, like say the Gobi Desert, when you won that, like it's not a case of a rugby team, you go out, you train for an hour, you work on different parts. It's not the case of you go to the gym with your personal trainer, he watches you do a few bench press. Like at stages you're running like crazy lengths, like 50 kilometers, even further than that at any one stage. Like how does one prep? So to give like my take on it, right, the best feat I've ever done was I actually recently did 100k in 24 hours. I walked, I didn't run because it wouldn't do my body any good. But after that, I couldn't walk for 2 days. I had about 20 blisters. My knees were in bits, couldn't really use them properly for a week or two. And I was like, my God, I could only think of what the likes of Ryan and other athletes are going through. But like when you say race, a lot of people say if you're doing a basic marathon, they go, yeah, build it up, maybe do 10, 20, 25K, and then just do the marathon. Is it similar process with you? Because you're doing such large distances. like, are you pretty much replicating the distances covered? Are you just set a pace, or how does the training workload look for you?
Yeah, I think it depends on like kind of what event I'm training for, and as you mentioned, like say you do 100 Ks a week to prepare for a marathon. I definitely wouldn't say for 100 miles, which would be 4 times the distance. I definitely wouldn't times the training by 4 and try run 400 Ks a week. So yeah, it's definitely and I found also like over the years, like currently I've actually probably the last 4 years I've actually dropped my mileage down quite a bit. I've kind of think I've figured out what kind of training works well, and I try and keep things more consistent. Whereas in my early years, I'd probably do like some much bigger kind of peaks and dropping down and peaks and dropping down. But I guess the best way to summarize is probably run anything from 15 to 25 hours a week. Sometimes a little bit more if I'm doing like a really big block volume of training. And that can be anything from like, if I'm doing lots of vertical, can be from like 100 kilometers to 250 kilometers in a week, depending on the training and like elevation gain. It can range from 2,000 meters to kind of 12,000 meters a week. So I guess it kind of all depends on the training, and then obviously as I mentioned, do some strength work and mobility work as well. So definitely it keeps me busy, but like I said, I definitely feel like the last couple of years kind of a little bit less volume seems to work better for me, and for me again it's about the longevity. I think when I first got into the sport, a couple of the really good guys, they had a thing where like kind of you had to run 200-mile weeks. If you're running 200-mile weeks, kind of you were golden, and the guys did really well, but then kind of, as I said, after 2 years, they kind of completely faded away. So I think it's a combination.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say like currently, if I look at say my last couple of weeks, probably average kind of closer to 14, 15-hour weeks. Like I don't have like, yeah, I'm not in like a big volume block of training.
And would you ever find yourself working short distance runs? Because like every time I go on social media, you see Strava scores of 2K runs, 4K runs, and obviously that would probably be seen as a little stretch for you. But do you ever find yourself testing your 3-4K distance, or even a quick time, being like, okay, I want to get X amount of time, or I want my heart rate at a certain level?
Not like too much. It's like it do definitely do some shorter intervals, as you say, kind of in the 1K range, or kind of 400 meters or something like that, but not that often. But there is like obviously during lockdown and last year, with there being no races and stuff, and like with us having like kind of limited space to run, that like definitely so I didn't do too much of it, but like as you say, guys were starting to look at like kind of seeing how fast they could run a 5K or a 10K. And yeah, it's yeah, like I've actually always wanted to like train like properly for a road marathon, get a good like block of training in, or like a 21K or a 10K. But I guess just with my schedule, and obviously my kind of bread and butter being kind of the ultra trail races, I just haven't got around to it. But I think it's cool to mix it up. And I guess one of the cool things, being a Red Bull athlete, I've gone to some like pretty cool events. Like I've done Red Bull K3, which is I think it was about 9.9 Ks, but you climb 3,000 meters up in Italy. So you get a thing in trail running called a vertical K. So it's about climbing a vertical K 1,000 meters in elevation gain. So it's just kind of that, like, and generally the races range from kind of 4 to 5 kilometers, where this was like 3 vertical K. So something like that is like pretty different. I've done also the Red Bull 400, where you kind of run up a ski slope, and it's like a flat out sprint, and a couple of other things. So I've like enjoy like mixing it up, even like running some shorter events just to kind of for fun. I kind of really enjoy that. I think if I had to keep like doing the same thing day in and day out, I definitely get bored. As I say, I've even done a couple of like adventure style races with mountain biking and a bit of paddling and stuff like that. So from time to time, it's definitely nice to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And as you were saying there, like the opportunities you've gotten from the travel experiences you've had, whether it's, as you said, running through deserts or jungles, Antarctica, you name it, and you've pretty much been there, got the t-shirt, blood, sweat and tears. But you said there, like, a big thing is not to be repetitive with your preparation or even just your mental prep. But a lot of people, and a few questions were sent in, like when people I hear even doing a basic marathon, they hit the wall, or they hit that stage where they're just like, this is just tedious. This is the same thing, my left, right, left, right. You go for such prolonged periods. Do you have like a mechanism where you just try to divorce yourself from what is actually happening? Do you just think of the finish line? Do you just quite literally immediately think, I'm just focusing on now, left, right, left, right? Because I know when I did my walk, I was just thinking in the now. Because the one time I thought about the finish line when I was 38K, I pretty much broke down and hit that metaphorical wall. But is there any methods or mental things you've trained yourself to kind of cope with the nature of the races you take part in?
Yeah, I always try to break it like an event down into bite-sized chunks. So say it's a marathon, literally break it down to kind of say four 10.5K stretches. And then like within that, just focus from getting, I guess, to one water table to the next, maybe they're 2 kilometers apart, just so it's more like mentally achievable. I think a lot of people say you're crazy. How can you wake up and run 100 miles in one day? And if I had to think about that, like if I had to say like, cool, I'm running 100 miles there, I think like mentally it's too much. But for me, it's like, cool, let me just break it down into running 4 marathons and focus on getting through one marathon. And then if the second marathon's going really badly, kind of focus on just kind of getting from one aid station to the next. And if things are going really, really badly, then it's like literally just get to the next tree and just like, I guess, kind of breaking it down into bite-sized chunks definitely helps. And I think the nice thing about trail running, and that's why I always say I got huge respect for the guys that do a lot of road running and they're racing on the road. At least with trail running, you're kind of running in some pretty epic locations. It's always changing, as you mentioned. Like I've been lucky to run in places like the Amazon jungle, and you're kind of looking out, I guess, for snakes there and kind of
Yeah, a
whatever other
python taking your head
animals
off.
are there. Yeah. And so I guess it kind of keeps it interesting. And I think that's definitely what's drawn me to trail running, because obviously I guess that's like from an event point of view, I guess like if I'm in a race and I'm competitive, like I can really just kind of push myself. But I guess the hard part is kind of doing that training day in and day out. You say going out there and doing the long training runs on your own. And to be honest, like if I had to do it on the road, I would
Yeah.
really struggle. But yeah, I guess in the mountains, things are like amazing scenery. Things are changing. Your like rhythm's always different. Like if you're running uphill or downhill or the flats, if it's technical, non-technical. So that's been pretty cool. And I've also been lucky to travel a lot, to go and like race abroad, but also to do some training there. So yeah, I kind of really love running in new places, and it's something I'd try and recommend to like a lot of guys, trail runners, I guess, even guys like running on the road. It doesn't mean you got to go overseas to do your training, but sometimes it's nice just to kind of drive somewhere new and fresh and go do your run there. It's just kind of, maybe it's not doing a 5K loop through your local town, it's the next door town, and you get to see something new. It's a slightly different stimulus, and you kind of, yeah, it's kind of quite rewarding to be able to kind of explore a new place on your own 2 feet.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned there with regards to the, say, jungle races or even desert races, how does your body react to that? And the thing is, I'm not going to say one paintbrush paints everyone the same. Like, everyone deals with races differently. They deal with the heat differently, cold, wind, etc. But like, did you have to prep differently? If you're going to be running 45-degree heat, does that mean you're going to need to be at a certain weight? Do you need to be running at a certain time, as opposed to maybe if you're in colder temperature, or say if the jungle, you'd be running slower, but it'd be more terrain, you'd be moving and ducking and climbing a bit more. Do you take all that into consideration, or is it just, I need to build up endurance that I can pretty much cope with whatever's thrown at me, whether it's weather or even terrain?
No, it's a good question, and definitely I think something that led to my early success, and something I've always tried to focus on is trying to train race specific as possible. Especially, I guess, the closer you get to an event, the more specific you wanna train. So, like you said, if it's a race with really hot conditions, like a desert race or the Western States 100-miler, it's really kind of trying to focus your training in on that, doing some heat training, trying to run midday when it's hotter, running with a couple of extra layers of clothing on. I think that's important. Or also looking at the race and the kind of, I guess, the elevation, the profile of a race. Is it quite flat and fast and very runnable, or is it kind of a lot of climbing? What do the climbs look like? Are they technical climbs? Is it like really kind of big climbs but runnable, and really trying to mimic those conditions? Or again, if it's at altitude, spending some time at altitude and acclimatizing. So I think that's really important from a training point of view. Also to kind of get prep your like gear and stuff. Like if you're running in really cold conditions, to kind of think your gear through, kind of visualize the race a bit. Think like kind of what kind of gear you're going to need, use, run through different scenarios. So I think a lot of kind of preparation can be done, and that can really help. Because I guess in an ultra, I always say, like, there's so many curveballs, so many kind of unexpected things. If they're kind of some things that you can control, I think it's important to try and figure those out, and make sure that like things you can control don't become variables during the race.
Yeah. Well, as you said, those outside circumstances or variables, as you said, that you have no control of. It brings me back to that Netflix documentary. I don't know if you've seen it, about the desert race, where the guy ends up getting lost in a
Yeah.
sandstorm and ends up having to eat loads of bats. I'm not saying that's the places you've gone to, but has there ever been a time in a race where it could have been injury, it could have been weather, it could have been anything, where a complete curveball came at you and you just had to deal with it? Was there ever an example where something that you never thought would happen happened and you kind of overcame it?
Yeah, I think, like, as I say, in most ultras, you always get some form of curveball, like that, like kind of maybe spraining, and like kind of, I've touched wood, been quite lucky with major injuries, but I have sprained my ankles a number of times. So during a race, you kind of sprain an ankle and you're kind of hobbling along, and you like, flip, is this the end of the race? I think it was 2018, my friend Raina Crystal and I ran across the Himalayas, so kind of from the Tibetan border across to the Indian border of Nepal. And there were constant curveballs. We got there, they had a really late winter, so we had to start in some pretty crazy and sketchy conditions. To be honest, I didn't know if we were actually going to make it out of there in one piece. Rainer Crystal, who I did it with, he got really bad frostbite. It was just like kind of one curveball after the next, getting lost as well. Just because like the valleys there are so big, it's like you end up in the wrong valley. You just go into the middle of nowhere. Also, like, we plotted a lot of the routes and on maps and stuff, and what we thought were villages, by the time we actually got there, because of the late winter, there was actually nothing there. So we had like no shelter, no food for a couple of days. Like, it, yeah, as you say, it's like some proper curveballs, which are kind of like a kind of life-threatening situations. But I guess with all of that, you kind of have to try and stay as calm as possible and not over panic. At the time, sometimes it's easier said than done. Even like, I guess, like some racing things that have gone wrong, like you kind of, I don't know, towards the second half of a race, or you're running 100 mile and you get tired and you run out of an aid station and you haven't taken all the nutrition you're supposed to do, and you kind of know, cool, it's like 30K is the next aid station, it's going to take 4 hours, and you pretty much know you're going to hit the wall at some stage because you don't have enough nutrition. So like, I guess stupid things like that happen, and you just have to try and kind of think on your feet. I always say it's like the person that actually can kind of manage the lows the best, is the person that ends up doing the best. And I think it's within an ultra race or life in general, I guess, when things are going well and kind of you're high-fiving everyone, it's kind of things seem pretty good, but I think it's when things go wrong and you kind of really have to figure things out is when you learn the most about yourself, but also like when it's important to really kind of stay calm and try and make the best of a bad situation.
And I say you have to do that a lot, where you got to make the best out of a bad situation and overcome things. And when you say finish a race, like what type of effect? So I don't want to keep harping on about my walk as if it's the best thing since sliced bread, but like for instance, that's me walking, that's me consecutively going for 23 hours. As I said, couldn't really walk. I lost like 3.8 kilograms. As I said, like had just huge joint pain. Like what's it like after, say, you complete the Gobi Desert race? Like what does recovery look like? What are the short-term effects on your body? Does your weight drop off? Do you have like 1,000 blisters? Like what does your body represent after one of these intense races?
Yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is you super hungry. I think you eat a lot for kind of 10 days, 2 weeks afterwards. Just obviously your metabolism really speeds up. And then like you mentioned, obviously definitely for kind of the first 5 to 7 days, you're extremely stiff and it's quite difficult to move, and then you start to ease up, but you still kind of got that deep seated like fatigue, especially after 100K or 100 miler. It's weird, like also like find like say if it's a shorter trail race like 20 or 30Ks, you can race it hard and you wake up the next day being quite sore and stiff, but you seem to like bounce back a bit quicker, whereas with an ultra there's definitely that deep kind of seated fatigue, as you say, like sometimes kind of your feet are a bit of a mess with blisters and stuff like that. Luckily, like I tend to be okay with my feet, but definitely like, yeah, just that kind of that like physical fatigue, but also just like you need to get a lot of sleep, a lot of rest. I guess a bit of like lack of motivation to get out and run. So it definitely takes its toll on you. But then also, like I say, if I look at a project like the Great Himalaya Trail, where Rain and I ran 1,600 Ks with like 80,000 meters of elevation gain over 24 days, it was weird, like kind of got a bit sore and stiff initially, and then your body just kind of adapts and you kind of get into it. And like I finished it actually physically feeling quite good. And I was like, Flip, like it's going to be a great year of racing. I've got this massive training block in at altitude. And then just like mentally, just like 2 days after that, just everything crashed. You just like super fatigued. And then like a week or two later, started getting like super like fatigued physically and just being really tired. And it took me, I think, about 6 to 9 months to kind of fully like overcome that. So yeah, I think you definitely have to respect your body a lot when it comes to like recovering from ultras. And yeah, it's a tricky thing, and that's why I said what's I think led to a lot of like overtraining, because generally guys that kind of, I suppose, that run ultras and do endurance sport are fairly like headstrong, pretty motivated and determined, and like setting themselves goals. So as I mentioned, like for me, like after the Gobi Desert race, like straight away I was like, cool, what next? Like I want to do something. And often you do well in an ultra and it's like, cool, what's the next one? And you kind of jump into training too quickly, and then you do the next ultra, but you're a bit injured and kind of training doesn't go as well. You don't do as well in the race, and it's like, oh, but I must actually just train harder for the next one. And it's kind of ends up being like a kind of a vicious spiral where kind of you just kind of end up overtraining yourself. So yeah, to cut a long story short, I think kind of like you really kind of have to look after yourself, and also there are times when I guess like I'll run a 100K race and I'll recover relatively well in the space of a week or 10 days, and there are other times where it's like after 3 weeks you're still kind of feeling flat and fatigued, and yeah, I guess just have to be kind to your body.
Yeah. And like I've read in some of the races you've taken part in, or even the challenges, where like hallucinations, you were imagining helicopters overhead, even though they weren't there, and much to probably your own shock.
Yeah.
But, and then I've even read how people's eyes, if it's quite windy or cold, they can lose the protection, the like liquid layer. There's so many moving parts where your body can nearly attack itself and self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that was sent in, and I know you've referred to both, but like, is there a preference for you? Would you rather say run in 45, 50 degree heat or very cold? Because I know the body adapts to both in different ways, but like, do you have a preference, or do people on the circuit have a preference to hot or cold weather?
I think it depends on the individuals. I would definitely say like I prefer running in the hotter conditions. Is definitely something that suited me. But again, I kind of find after winning Western States in 2017, when it was like really hot, I've kind of always battled a bit with heat since then. So again, doing some kind of work with Professor Tim Noakes, I think there's a large mental element to things, and I don't know if just like mentally my body doesn't want to kind of be exposed to the like those kind of conditions again. So I do find I struggle. I think looking at kind of the European trail runners, they'll definitely say cooler conditions suit them. And I suppose a lot of kind of the American ultra runners would probably be the same, just because they're used to some cooler conditions. Or I guess kind of referring to American ultra runners, I guess it depends with them, depending on where they are based. But yeah, I'm kind of currently kind of starting to lean more towards kind of like running in cooler conditions. But I think if I had to choose, if you said the conditions are going to be cold, wet, and minus 20 degrees, or kind of really hot and kind of 40 degrees, I think I'll take hot and 40 degrees. I just feel more comfortable with those conditions. And I know if it's a race, generally, even I mentioned now, like I seem to struggle more, but I still feel like I'll be able to do better than a lot of the guys, just because I think I feel a lot more comfortable in those kind of conditions.
Okay. So when COVID ends, we won't be seeing you coming over to Ireland to brave the wet, windy trails of Galway or somewhere.
Yeah, never say never.
Yeah. Well, that'll put you through your pace, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And just one of the last things just to talk about here, Ryan, is you've got your own book, Trailblazer, out, and I always find it fascinating when people who do, in most ordinary Joe's eyes, like magnificent things, or push themselves beyond what a lot of people deem as possible or physically possible. Just to kind of summarize it yourself, because a lot of people who will listen to this, and even some of my friends as well, whether they're runners, whether they're mad into their hikes, even some are mountaineers who have aspirations to climb Everest. I'm not saying you'll run up Everest, but it's similar mindsets there. Like, what type of stuff would someone get out of reading your book from your experiences and the lessons you put into that?
Yeah, so I think for me, like writing a book was really cool to piece together my story. And as I mentioned, I guess my journey hasn't been kind of that kind of straight down the line, or kind of normal, in terms of I didn't grow up wanting to be an ultra runner. It was never kind of like a goal of mine. So I think it's been like cool to tell my story and show that like anything is possible if you're passionate about what you do and kind of love what you do. And I really try to aim the book, or kind of Steve Smith, who kind of or who ghost wrote it for me, and we spent a lot of time together. Really try to aim it not just at like a running audience, as you say, make it or ideally, hopefully, like kind of guys from all spheres will read it. You don't have to be sports person to get into it, and really just kind of, I guess, show people that anything is possible. And then I've also got a number of takeouts in the book, which can be really specific to kind of for running or to endurance sports. But then there are also a couple of more kind of general takeouts. So yeah, I think it's been cool, like just kind of really kind of telling my story, but kind of making it a bit like aimed at a wider audience. And hopefully can do book number 2 shortly.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Well, anyone who's interested in that, we'll leave it in the description. So have
Cool,
a look if it interests you. And that's what I mean. The last thing, I suppose, just to ask you about, Ryan, and I know we referred to your age, but I don't think that really matters. Or people like Victor Matfield back in the rugby days, they wouldn't exactly be saying 39, 40 is the end of the road. But obviously with COVID, I'd imagine it's been somewhat frustrating because you haven't been able to, explore and go to international events. I even saw you did, 100 miles, or could have been 100K around your house, which was crazy for anyone. Yeah. But do you have any ambitions? Because from even chatting to you here, it seems like there is still fire there. And as you said, as long as you still enjoy it and have passion for it, you'll keep running, keep doing things. Like, do you have any goals you want to achieve before you properly take a step back? I'm sure it's something you'll keep doing for the majority of your life, but really competitively, really trying to win some big races, is that still firmly on your mind? Or are you just now kind of just enjoying the moment, taking it as it comes and seeing what's next?
No, for sure. Like I think, like as I mentioned, I'm definitely like doing a lot more kind of adventure style, fastest known time style projects. But there are like a few races that kind of really appeal to me. Probably the big one is Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, which I've never seemed to get right. So that's a big goal of mine that I'd love to get right. And then, as I said, there are definitely some bigger projects I'm working on. So to kind of combine the two is like kind of racing and projects is a big focus for me. And as you said, I think it's just been like, by doing that, it keeps me passionate, and I feel like I've still got a couple of years left before kind of, as you say, taking a step back. But I guess I'm also like trying to set things up on the side that I could like, that kind of, I guess trail running is, I guess, is more than just a sport for me. I guess like it's become a way of life. So setting up things that I can still be involved in the sport, or when I say kind of involved with trail running, and not kind of have to continue kind of competing to be involved in the sport. So kind of working on a couple of exciting things, but like I said, the fire and the passion is still there. So hopefully still got a couple of good races left in me.
Good stuff. Well, that's good to hear. And just last thing, Ryan, how we finish these podcasts is we do a quick fire round. Now it's nothing too crazy, or there's no court cases or anything that will be coming down the line. They're not too tricky. But there's just a few here that one or two sent in, and I came up with a few myself. So first thing that pops into your head, feel free to share with us. So one of the questions that was sent in was the toughest race you've ever done.
The Leadville 100 miler or Jungle Marathon?
The best advice you'd give someone to get better at running?
Have fun.
Okay. Your favorite film of all time?
Favorite film? Snatch.
Snatch, good choice. Bit of Irish heritage in that,
exactly.
So they'll like that. If you had one song on repeat for a run, what would it be and why?
Jeez, what's the latest song by Justin Bieber? No,
I don't know.
I'm joking.
I'm not his fan.
I listen to the Kooks a lot, so I guess a couple of their songs.
Okay. The dumbest advice you've ever received from someone in your line of work?
The dumbest advice. Just don't worry about chafe. Like not
Oh, debt, taxes, and
Yeah,
chafing.
jeez.
Yeah.
No, I think it was that same guy that got such bad chafe. He actually had to use duct tape between his butt cheeks to stop the chafe. So it
Oh,
wasn't a happy ending for him.
no, that's not a Hollywood ending if I've heard it. And lastly, Ryan, this is always the toughest one for guests: is sum yourself up in 3 words.
I'd definitely say stubborn, determined, um, and yeah, determined, and I was going to say happy-go-lucky, but that's not really passionate. Yeah.
Okay, well said. Well, listen, Ryan, I want to thank you on behalf of people who will listen to this. And I know it took a while to get it
Yeah.
organized, but I know we've both been busy. So it's great to finally get the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah,
I know
thank you. It's been really fun.
I speak on behalf of absolutely everyone that we hope COVID ends pretty quickly. We hope people can start exploring. And for your sake as well, you can start taking part in these international events. And just even myself, as I said, I'm very intrigued to see what's down the road for you. As you said, it's not time to close the curtain just yet in your career. So
No.
I look forward to that. And then also the projects and all the up and coming things as well. I look forward to seeing as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And yeah, it's been really fun.
No worries, Ryan. Well, listen, thanks again.
Cool. Thanks.